On this episode of Uncommon Sense, we talk about the Chestertonian poem, The Convert. Grettelyn and I will open up this poem and find out what's going on inside. Stay tuned. That's all coming up on Uncommon Sense. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Uncommon Sense. I am your co-host, Albert Sines, joined with my co-host, Grettelyn Darkey. Grettelyn, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. It's a nice sunny morning.
Yeah, it's sunny here too. Always good to have some sunshine instead of anything dreary and cold or wet or,
Happy June.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right. Happy June. So I said in the intro, we're going to talk about a Chestertonian poem, The Convert. And if you haven't gathered yet, Grettelyn and I are on a path, a journey towards this year's 41st annual Chesterton Conference, which is basically encompassing the theme of Chesterton and conversion. So Grettelyn thought this might be a good poem for obvious reasons. So before we do our discussion, Grettelyn is actually going to let us enjoy her reading, her interpretation of The Convert. Grettelyn,
All right.
as you will.
Thank you. I will take it away. So this is The Convert by G.K. Chesterton. I have here that it's from the collected poems of Chesterton, and that's published in 1927, if you're interested. After one moment, when I bowed my head, and the whole world turned over and came upright, and I came out where the old road shone white. I walked the ways and heard what all men said, forests of tongues like autumn leaves unshed, being not unlovable but strange and light, old riddles and new creeds, not in despite but softly as men smile about the dead. The sages have 100 maps to give that trace their crawling cosmos like a tree. They rattle reason out through many a sieve that stores the sand and lets the gold go free. And all these things are less than dust to me, because my name is Lazarus and I live. Let the chills settle.
But it's a poem, but you sort of let's say you sort of stick it to you at the very end. You're like, oh, like where are we going? They're like, oh, it's
So
about Lazarus.
Chesterton.
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
So Chesterton. Actually reminds me of my first experience of Chesterton, if I can rabbit hole for just a second.
Sure.
Which was the start of my conversion, so it does tie in. But I read a story by him, and I was thinking, this is so dumb. I don't like this at all. This guy's crazy. He's ridiculous. He's silly. What is this? And then, of course, like the last sentence, it all made sense. And I was like, I have to read everything this man ever wrote. This is amazing. This is wonderful. That is Chesterton for you sometimes. Yeah. And I feel like that actually encompasses the conversionary experience too. Sometimes it feels like there's all these things that are sort of hitting you from different angles, and they don't make sense, and they feel weird, and it doesn't work in your mind, and then you sort of turn towards the truth, and boom, it all comes together.
Right. It's that one thing sometimes, sometimes it's not the most obvious things, sort of in a conversion or a metanoia type of moment. It's like, hey, here, look, let me give you all this really great information. And then it's the one thing on the side that sort of catches you, right?
Or the experiential moment that couldn't get you in the same way that all the knowledge and all the arguments tried to.
Right. So you give someone 100 books on the topic. They're like, yeah, this isn't doing it for me. All right, come with me. We're going to take a trip. And you walk into this place, whatever it is, and suddenly your eyes are opened because you saw it and experienced it in a different way.
I knew somebody who went to Italy, and he saw all the beautiful cathedrals and churches and said, wow, if this was what it was like in America, I would be Catholic.
Yeah.
But that is what it's like. It's just in a different way.
Right.
Sometimes in that way, but mostly in a different way. Yeah, and I don't know. Just to pull out right away my favorite line, I think, from this poem. I love that he talks about the sieve that stores the sand and lets the gold go free. Sort of all the collection of human philosophy that rejects the truth, Christianity, lets it fall through because it's hard, because it's not what you agree with, because whatever reason. But it's such a beautiful way to say it. Stores the sand and lets the gold go free. And how often do we feel like we are literally sifting through sand trying to find truth? And thankfully we know where to find it. But
Well, and that's very much Chesterton, right? And I mean, he is all about truth in its sort of rawest form and sort of running with that. And he very much sort of is an opposition to the sand, especially of his time. I mean, you look at all the things that he sort of basically very clearly says, no, not this, and basically supports the truth, which is like, it makes sense when he phrases it. You're like, yeah. So Chesterton hangs onto the gold and says, dump the sand and take the gold instead. This is where you should be, because it just makes more sense.
Right. Yeah. And I walked the ways and heard what all men said. Yeah. I mean, I feel like when you're searching for truth, you kind of wander around, you listen to what people are saying. Some people sort of stop at the point where you just take what you like, which is kind of sad, because I do feel like there is a point where you have to go beyond. And I did hear about John Henry Newman when he became Catholic, because he was an Anglican bishop, I think. He had to leave behind pretty much everything and everyone that he loved, that because he was pretty utterly rejected by everyone that he had known, and not super accepted in the Catholic circles, because it was almost like when Paul first converted, and everyone's kind of like, is this guy for real, or should we still be hiding from him? But you have to sort of take that step beyond and not worry about what you have to leave behind.
Right. And I mean, I think you kind of get a glimpse of a choice or something that happens and something better comes from it, right? So you have to, you're talking about make a decision in the case of John Henry Newman, and he had to leave behind things. But what was waiting for him on the other side was something much better. In the very beginning of the poem, after one moment, he says, like, he's very clear, after one moment when I bowed my head and the whole world turned over and came upright, and I came out where the old road shone white. So it was this, this one moment, and basically, death comes, but then everything is right, everything is good, everything is what it wasn't before. And, whether we're talking about the decisions we make when we're living or what happens to us after our death, God willing, if eternity in heaven waits for us, it's just that one sort of change, right? That one big shift from something that we did, and it's life changing, it's life altering, right? It's never the same again after that moment, after that decision, after that choice.
Yeah, beautiful, for sure. And in true Chestertonian fashion, he sort of discovers it by standing on his head. There's this idea in Chesterton, in lots of Chesterton, that when you stand on your head, you see things correctly. When you see things, quote unquote, upside down, that's actually the right way. Not because things are right upside down, but because we are always sort of upside down and seeing things the wrong way, through original sin. And through sort of upending everything, turning everything the wrong way around, he has some beautiful things to say about the baby in the manger, and how unlikely a king that is, to put the king as a baby, first of all, and then in the manger, in poverty, is so upside down. It just turns the pyramid on its head. But that's God, and it doesn't look right to us, but it's right to him. And when you sort of know the whole story, you can see it. Yeah. Anyway. Beautiful use of color through this whole poem that I always love. Forests of tongues like autumn leaves unshed. Oh, just gorgeous. Yeah, but again, so true. There's all these voices, right, from all these different sides, and it's comforting to know that there were all these voices in his time before the technology, social media storm that we live in now. It was still an age of literature, and there were still a lot of people giving their opinions. Scientism, spiritualism, all these things were rampant at the time. Of course, atheism, the Bolshevik revolution was happening. Like crazy things were happening in the world. So it's kind of comforting to me always to know that we're not so unique in our hard times. Maybe we have special challenges to finding the truth, but there have always been challenges to finding the truth. It's always been sort of an exciting quest that people have had to go on.
You know, I think that Chesterton has made it abundantly clear, right, that we don't have new problems today. We have the same problems sort of wrapped in a different sort of container. Chesterton had his problems, and before him, there was probably someone else who had the same problems, you know, regarding the world, society, religion, faith. You know, all of these things have sort of existed, but we just sort of wrap them up in new containers every 100 years, you know, or so. And when that, but we want to say it's like this is brand new to us. Well, not particularly new to us. It's just your first experience of it, but others have been going through this for a very long time.
Or, you know, they had it so much easier in the past. Well, did they? Sin was still around then, too.
Yeah, right. So, thanks, Adam and Eve. We know that because of you, right, and this decision, that sin has existed since the beginning. But then we want to, you know, like you said, we want to look at it and be like, wow, sin is just really rampant today. It's like, well, go back to Scripture again. I mean, you know,
yes,
Sodom and Gomorrah, you know, so been some extreme sins since biblical times, you know. So let's not sort of try to say that today it's the worst it's ever been. It's a rough world. It's a rough world. I do not discount that. But the world has had plenty of rough times for millennia. Yeah. You know, I wanted to point out in the poem, I like it says old riddles and new creeds, just that one section, right? And it goes back to just a lot of this sort of verbose thought, you know, that people are just spewing out in all sorts of ways, right? You know, you've got new thoughts, old thoughts, you've got good ideas, you've got bad ideas, you have ideas that don't make sense. You're not even sure what people are trying to say, what they're trying to teach, what they're selling, what they're smoking, what they're preaching. And it's just all over the place. And, you know, again, Chesterton's time, he recognizes this, right? You're like, yeah, we've got some of the same old stuff, and we've got a lot of new creeds. He says creed. He doesn't say new ideas. He says new creeds, right? So there was a lot of this opportunity for people to sort of have their own sort of oaths that they followed, their own sort of laws. There's like, this is my moment, and this is my uniqueness, and this is what I'm going to follow, sort of my own personal constitution, right? And it's all just being jumbled together, and people are like, well, I'll try it, or I'll try this, or I'll try that. I'll take a dip in the pool. They're like, no. Just wait. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do any of that. And we go back to the line that you liked, right? So through many a sieve that stores the sand and lets the gold go free. So all that sand, right? All those old riddles, all those new creeds, you don't need anything except the gold. You don't need anything except the truth. And that's where we, you know, and Lazarus, right? Like, because my name is Lazarus and I live. And he's like, hey, I've got the gold. I've got the gold. I live because of the gold, because of the truth. And that's what Chesterton wants to try to point out is like, hold on to that one truth. We don't need any of this sort of new garbage that's surrounding us.
But it does point to I think, a very interesting truth that everyone feels like they have to believe in something, right? So it's kind of this interesting thing where we have this feeling inside that I'm sure is from God that we know we have to believe in something. So you get these people that are extremely adamant about veganism or extremely adamant about Buddhism or whatever, or, neo-Buddha, whatever it is now. These people that they feel passionately, and I respect that, because I think passion is better than apathy, right? So it's nice to see people trying to believe in things, but at the same time, it's like, how's your journey? Are you sure that's the right thing? And I think part of the reason for me that Catholicism stood out as correct, and I think this is true of Chesterton as well, is that there's many personal creeds out there. Like you said, everyone has their own constitution. But a personal creed tends to be strictly personal and therefore narrow, and it only works for that person and maybe one or two other people. But the Catholic creed is truly universal. It's something that you can seriously give yourself to, along with hundreds and thousands of other people who also believe that thing. And that's incredible. That's sort of this amazing feeling of, I and all these people believe. You stand there in Mass and you say, I believe in one God. And this feeling of like, we actually all believe this together is amazing. Whereas maybe you couldn't even get like two vegans to agree on what they believe. So like the idea is you can have this true Catholicism in the sense of the word, as in universal. You can have this universalism, and you can sort of rest your creed in Catholicism because it all makes sense. And when you get there, you have this feeling like, oh, I actually do belong here.
I had this conversation with my wife over the weekend about similar to what you're saying. Like, I support everyone's ability to choose what they believe in. Someone has a particular thought, that is their free will. Like, okay, you are exercising your free will. That is how you were created to be. So be it. Go ahead. But when it comes down to sort of the nuts and bolts, right? It's like, okay, but do you have an absolute truth to base your belief on? And a lot of people don't actually. What they have is their opinion. They have their emotions. They're like, well, I want this thing. I believe this thing. It's like, okay, but where's the absolute truth? What does it rest on? Where's the base? Where's the support? Well, it's what I believe. That's fine. You can believe that, but just tell me where your absolute truth is.
Can you say, I'm sure?
Right. So with our creed in the Catholic Church, like, we know where our absolute truth is. Our absolute truth is based off of from divine revelation, from the teachings of the magisterium. We get it. Like, we have an absolute truth, and it's not this is not an opinion matter. This isn't like, well, I like red, you like blue, or blue is better than green, or this sports team is better than this. Those are all opinions. Like, when we're talking about legitimate belief, what is it on top of? What does it rest on? And for us in our church, in our faith, that like our creed has an absolute truth that it's based off of. So I really sort of want people to sort of challenge themselves and say, okay, what is your personal creed? What is your absolute truth? Do you have an absolute truth, or is it actually just your feelings, your emotions, your own personal thoughts and opinions?
And I think what really differentiates the Catholic faith is that we base everything really on the fact that Jesus came back to life. Like, the last line of this poem is so beautiful because he talks about Lazarus, who, of course, in the Bible, Jesus brought back to life. this is something that only God can do. I'm actually working on this with my 4-year-old. This is like all I'm doing with him as far as like, catechism. I'm like, Jesus came back to life and not even a superhero can do that. And he's like, huh, that's cool. Because it's a fact. It's a fact, right? It's not like we're basing this on something that we think, something that we feel. The fact of the matter is Jesus was able to rise from the dead because he is God. Therefore, I believe in him. And all these other things sort of follow from that. But it's not a debatable point. It's a fact. There are many witnesses to attest to this. Maybe you can try to say that didn't happen, but we're pretty sure it did. We have lots of eyewitness accounts. But anyway, the idea is that this is something that actually happened, that we can sort of sit all of it's a historical fact that we can sort of sit all of our creed upon. And therefore it doesn't move. And it's a fact that happened completely regardless of me and my thoughts and feelings. I am blessed enough to be able to be part of it through my faith and through my confession of faith. But the idea is Jesus lives, and that's what's compelling. That's what's always been compelling about the gospel. Bishop Barron says it very beautifully many times. He said, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then what was the point of all these preachers? If Paul and Barnabas are going around saying, oh, you should be nice to each other, that's not very compelling. So I knew this guy who died and then came back to life. Whoa, all of a sudden, hopefully you have people's attention.
Yes, right.
It's weirdly become sort of blasé because we've been living with it for 2,000 years. But if you can even dig into that first feeling, pretend you're a Greek and you've never heard this before, and suddenly these people come into your town and say, I knew this guy who died and then he came back to life. Wow. Tell me more about that. And then, and by the way, you can tap into this and you can come back to life too. Okay, tell me more about that, please. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of shock factor and amazement that I think Chesterton felt in this moment. And I think we should feel too every day about our faith.
There's so many, he basically, Chesterton in this poem has so many references to sort of the modern world, trying to sort of wrap up Lazarus' story in the poem. But, another line, which also references society, the sages have 100 maps to give. And I think we see all of these options, right? Like society wants to give people a million options, like this is how you should live your life. You should walk this path. You should do this. You should make a choice about what type of person you are. Are you even a person? Because you can believe whatever you want to believe about you. Yes, the whole thing with, gender choice and, who you really are, who you tell yourself you are, that's really who you are. And the things we want to teach kids and the directions we want to send, just like you said, 100 maps. The sages have 100 maps to give. And we're still doing that. We're still giving people hundreds and hundreds of maps to give. But it's unnecessary. All of these things, all these sort of these, all the stuff, all of the creeds, all the riddles, all the maps, all the sand, it's all just unnecessary, right? It's like there is one map which you should be concerned about, and it wraps itself up again in our own creed of the Catholic faith, right? And if we could sort of try to narrow that down and be like, you're just making your life harder. And, so Lazarus goes through all of this, right? Says, hey, but my name is Lazarus and I live. It's really kind of really short and to the point. Why? Because it wasn't about 100 maps, and it wasn't about all the sand, and it wasn't about all the old riddles. So he can see that now. Like Lazarus sees all the stuff. He's like, no. I've got the one thing I know is important. That's Jesus Christ. So it's like, why do we constantly just try to fill up our lives, and why is the world trying to fill our lives with just a million directions to go when there's only one that's really, really important to the eternity of our souls?
Well, again, going back to those personal creeds, I think it's sort of like an ego trip. You know, if you believe something and you can get someone else to believe it, it's like, oh, you have a follower. Social media, right? I have a follower. Someone agrees with me. Someone thinks what I think. Yeah, and it's kind of it's just kind of sad because again, you really end up at the end of the day with a church of one. Aw, you know. But the idea of being part of a church of millions is so incredible and so beautiful.
Right,
Uh,
right. I mean, a million people, but one map, right? Or millions of
yeah,
people and
all
one map.
following the same, and maybe the map has many roads, but they all lead to the same place.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it's well, I'm gonna just take a minute really quickly to do actually 2 commercial breaks. There is a book available on the Chesterton Society store called My Name is Lazarus, taken from this poem. And it's actually a collection of conversion stories from many Chestertonians who have lived recently and came to their conversion because of G.K. Chesterton. So that's a beautiful book that you might want to check out.
Go to chesterton.org/store and look for that book.
Thank you, Albert. Also, this year's theme for the conference, the Chesterton Conference, is Chesterton and conversion. So if you want to experience the Chestertonian conversion story, if you want to experience people who have gone through this with Chesterton, if you've gone through it with Chesterton, if you're just interested in learning more about who this crazy guy is who wrote all these amazing things, consider coming. It's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin this year. The dates for it are July 28th through July 30th. And you can register for that online again at chesterton.org/conference. And yeah, just go there and follow all the links and you can get registered easily. It's always an amazing experience. I haven't been to one in probably about 5 years, but before that I was, because I started having kids. But before that I was going like every year for about 5 years. And oh man, it was kind of a life-changing experience every single time. So the people, the conversations, the talks, just wonderful. You get to connect with people who understand the faith, and you get to connect with people who love Chesterton. You get to learn more. It's a great experience. So go to chesterton.org/conference and register today.
I want to jump into that theme for the conference because you said, so the main theme is Chesterton and conversion. We have like a sub sort of heading, which is learning to think again. And, Chesterton is such a big proponent of, getting your mind in the right place, like, sort of using your common sense. Think about what it is that you're experiencing. And I think what we sort of, in this poem, right, there's all this stuff that Lazarus sees and experiences, but he was able to sort of think through it. He was able to sort of see, and I feel that in society, we sort of do need to do that. Like we do need sort of a reawakening to our brains. We need to sort of open up our brains, our minds, our mental processes to thinking in an appropriate way. Because we've done really good about just sort of like action and responding and, taking our emotions and letting them get really riled up about things. And we've done a lot of things that are kind of really dumb. But we haven't gotten back to just thinking, thinking. I watch some of this stuff on the news, or I read articles in the news about some of these like protests, and these people are they're not thinking. They're just angry. So many of them are just so angry, and they're shouting and they're screaming and they're violent. I'm thinking, they are not using their brains. I don't mean that in a rude way. I just mean that in an honest way. Like, they're not thinking about what's happening. They're not thinking about the situation. They're just responding. It's all just sort of pure emotion, pure reaction. And sometimes I see how the people who are peaceful, trying to make their own sort of statement, and they're just being attacked in the most violent way. I'm like, someone isn't thinking here, and it's the people who are angry and just so visceral in what they do. I'm like, society needs a rebirth to thinking again. So I'm so glad that sort of that subheading to our main theme, Chesterton and conversion, learning to think again, because God knows we need to learn to think again.
Yes, and to think for ourselves, not to think what we're told to think, not to follow those 100 maps and all that sand that is out there saying, this is the way, this is the way. The only creed that I've ever found that says this is the way, but think for yourself is the Catholic Church. How freeing, how beautiful, and how freeing.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that interesting, right? So we learn in our teaching of our faith, right, that we have this free will and that God will not impede upon it. And so, okay, here's the truth. Now it's up to you to decide what to do with it. And we look at everyone else's sort of personal creed, and they're not giving people a choice.
Right.
It's like, believe me or die, basically.
Or get canceled.
Or get canceled, or get burned, or get destroyed, or get violently attacked. Like, you will believe it, or you said, or get canceled, sometimes in the worst way possible. I'm thinking, wait a second, that's not freedom. That's not giving me a choice.
And there have been abuses of the Catholic faith in that way, but we recognize them as abuses.
Right.
They aren't part and parcel of the creed. The creed condemns that sort of abuse.
So, it's nice that God, the Creator, allows us, right, to walk through the forests of tongues like autumn leaves unshed, that he lets us hear the old riddles and the new creeds, that we get to, have the presentation of 100 maps, that we're going to be surrounded in a jar of sand trying to find the gold. God says, okay, this is the world. I'm going to allow you to experience life, and I'll be here in the midst of it. Come and find me. I'll be right here. But never does he sort of force it upon us. He just lets us experience our lives and make our decisions, hopefully, God willing, in favor of a life that will lead us to an eternity in heaven.
And he waits for us so patiently and so beautifully. It reminds me of that line from the movie The Count of Monte Cristo when Jim Caviezel's character says to the old priest, "I don't believe in God." And the priest says, "Doesn't matter. He believes in you."
So true.
So true. It really doesn't matter. He's there. He's waiting for you. Just come and see.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Grettelyn and I have been sort of opening up the G.K. Chesterton poem, The Convert, which follows a very beautiful poem, sort of revealing a life of Lazarus. And I invite you to listen to the poem yourself. You can go listen to Grettelyn's rendition again, or find it online. It's readily available. Again, it's in the Collected Poems of G.K. Chesterton, published 1927. So you can track that poem down. But more than anything, we hope that, wherever you're at in your own life, maybe your own Chestertonian journey, if you're on a journey of conversion, that you will continue to move forward at your own pace, find a path in the midst of all the sand, and that maybe you will consider signing up for this coming conference, as Grettelyn told us about. So it's coming up here next month. So TikTok, chesterton.org/conference. Hope that you can join us in person or virtually. That's also an option. So if you can't make it to Milwaukee, think about joining us online. Lots of great stuff. And we'll focus in more at the conference on this theme of conversion, where as a reminder, we celebrate Chesterton's own conversion, the 100th anniversary of his conversion to the Catholic faith. So really a great time to just celebrate conversion and learn how to think again. So thanks so much for joining us. And Grettelyn, as always, thanks so much. Always good to have you on board for the show.
Thank you, Albert. Always such a pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, until the next time, remember, Chesterton is always better with friends. We'll see you next time.